Hey guys, what's up? So this is going to be an interesting video. God's been dealing with me about a few things over the last month or so. Specifically, the biblical command to love your neighbor as yourself, to lay your life down. In Jesus' command that if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. I've been reading a book, Intercessor by Rees Howells, and I also listened to a message by Brother Jesse Duplantis about his trip to heaven. I haven't finished it yet, but I've seen part of it. And then, of course, last night at church, Pastor Terry Copeland Pearsons had an amazing. It was just a good service that she was leading, and part of what she said there was talking about that very thing, about how the whole purpose of leadership, the whole purpose of being a Christian, the whole purpose of standing in a place of authority, in essence, is to be a steward and a servant with that authority. And that's basically what God has been dealing with me over the last several weeks, is that, it's so easy to say, oh yes, I'm dead to myself, I am dead to the flesh, Christ lives in me, until it gets down to the nitty gritty and you realize, maybe I wasn't quite as dead, or at least wasn't acting quite as dead as I thought I was. Dead to myself, dead to my own desires. After I got home last night, I was reading this book, the foreword to a book by Aldous Huxley called A Brave New World, which for some reason has been banned by multiple countries. I haven't read the book, so I can't say why yet, but I imagine it's because it's sort of a dystopian take on scientific advancement, similar to 1984, but just with a little different flair, which would give it cause to be banned by certain governments. Anyway, other than that, part of what he said in the foreword was that the goal of totalitarian governments isn't just gulags anymore, but that the next step is to make servants happy in their servitude. In other words, it's not just that we control them, that we control the masses, and that we can direct the populace wherever we want. The main goal and objective is to so manipulate them that they actually enjoy their servitude. They enjoy being menial slaves to the state. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, yeah, that's exactly what we see today. The government's just trying to control everyone and make them happy about being locked up, about being cooped up, about, having to comply with all these regulations, about not having freedom and being happy about it. We see that all throughout the world right now. But then I thought, the counter argument that many would make is, well, religion, including Christian religion, has done the same thing, right? Is that there is the saying that says religion is the opium of the masses. And I'm not saying it hasn't been abused, that there haven't been times where people in authority have used their authority to manipulate scriptures and get people to take certain verses and use those verses to enjoy serving them instead of serving God, and basically using verses that were intended for the body to serve each other and instead twisting them for believers, those lay people, so to speak, to purely serve those who were on the top of the religious hierarchy, instead of it being a mutual thing. And but I thought, well, then what makes Christianity different? Because I realized, if I want to be at the top of a spiritual hierarchy, like, why do you want to be in ministry? Even if it's looking for eternal reward, it's like, well, I want to rule over the nations in the millennium. Okay, great, but why? If it's just so you can be in charge of people, if it's just so you can rule over people and that's it, so if people are under you and you're the head, how does that make you any different than a dictator? I mean, really, that's exactly what dictators are, is that they have the power and they relish just having authority over people. But what makes Christianity different is, I was thinking, so what makes a relationship with Christ, what makes true Christianity, not just religious junk that isn't biblically sound, but what makes true Christianity different than that? And it's this exact same thing that I just said in the beginning of the video. It's this willingness, and not just willingness, but desire to be a servant. That even in spheres of authority, even in a position of authority, you're using that position purely to serve others. And I think our pastors are a great example of that, but that has to be the heart of every Christian. That's the nature of Christ. That's the mind of Christ. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who didn't consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant, coming in the likeness of men. And it's this desire and heart to be a servant to others that really is the distinctive factor between being a dictator and being a servant of God in a place of authority. Because a servant of God in a place of authority is not using that so that people can just be their menial slaves and serve them, but a person that is a servant of God and walking in love and exemplifying the nature of Christ, even if they are in a position of authority, will be using that authority to bless and serve others. And this is why we talk about faithfulness, like who gets to be in those positions of authority, and we talk about faithfulness, and many times in Christian circles, it's mostly, yes, be faithful with your time, be faithful with your money, which is absolutely true, because Jesus actually did say, if you're not faithful in unrighteous mammon, who will entrust to you the true riches of God? But right on the other hand, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13, if I give all my goods to feed the poor, and yet I have not love, it profits me nothing. So even though you could be giving all this money consistently, if you're not doing it in love, it's still profiting you nothing. Well, if you're being promoted, that's profit, right? You're profiting if it's eventually causing you to climb up the ladder. That is profit. But Paul said, if I give all these things, give all my money, and don't have love, it profits me nothing. And so I think you can actually abstract the principle and say, yes, absolutely, you need to be faithful in money, but deeper still, you need to be faithful to walk in love. Deeper still, everything you do, including how you handle your finances, needs to be a expression and manifestation of the love of God inside of you, that you're using that nature of God out, yielding to that nature of God inside of you, and using all your assets, including your money, which represents your time, which represents in a way the life that you have lived. Not really. A man's life does not consist in the things he possesses, but there is something to that, is that you need to use all your assets, including your money, to walk in love. And that's truly being faithful in finances, obeying God, but letting all that you do be an expression of the love of God that's inside of you. That is the faithfulness that leads to promotion, because it's the love of God. It's being faithful to act like Jesus would act with natural resources. It's being faithful to manifest the nature of God even when you're not in a place of authority, even when you haven't been given the spiritual assets. You're being faithful to manifest the love of God with the natural assets that he has given you. And as you're faithful to manifest the love of God in doing that, and being faithful to manifest the love of God with those natural things, specifically money, etc., that you have. And I'm not just talking about giving to a specific ministry. I'm talking about what Jesus said, laying down your life for the brethren, which could include giving to a ministry, but it could include buying lunch for someone who's hungry. It could include what John talked about, buying food and clothing to believers that are in need and don't have the resources at the moment to buy them for themselves. In any context, it's walking in love, being faithful to walk in love with your natural assets. That leads to promotion, to being able to be trusted to walk in love with greater and greater assets, including spiritual assets. So that was what I got out from yesterday's service, and basically it's so glad I streamed it. I was wiped out from work yesterday. I actually didn't go. I wanted to, and I almost missed it entirely, but God was like, you need to at least stream it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I'm so glad I did, because it was just a continuation, one step after another, of what Jesus, the Lord, has really been dealing with me over the last month or so, few weeks anyway. And it's just a blessing. It's just a blessing that everything we do has to be done in love.